On a silent mountain road under a sea of stars, one whispered secret between Jungkook and Jimin changes the night and their lives forever. The bus engine died with a shudder so sudden that Jungkook's heart slammed against his ribs before he even realized the vehicle had stopped moving. For a moment no one spoke. Outside the window, the mountain road stretched into darkness, the thin ribbon of asphalt swallowed by tall pines and silver mist. The night sky above the mountains looked impossibly wide, scattered with stars so bright they felt close enough to touch. The silence was unnatural after hours of laughter, music, and the low rumble of the tour bus engine. "Did we break down?" Taehyung muttered from the back, his voice half amused, half curious. The driver tried the ignition again. The engine coughed once, then surrendered completely. Namjoon leaned forward in his seat. "That doesn't sound promising." Jungkook slowly stood, stretching his shoulders. Hours of traveling after another stadium concert had left his muscles tight, his mind buzzing with leftover adrenaline. Even now, he could still hear the echoes of fans screaming their names. But out here there was nothing. Just wind moving softly through trees. Just the faint scent of damp earth drifting through the open bus door. And the stars. "So we're stuck?" Jimin asked, leaning his chin on the seat in front of him. The driver turned around apologetically. "Looks like it. I'll need to check the engine, might take a while." Yoongi exhaled slowly, already reaching for his jacket. "Honestly, after that concert I don't mind a break." One by one they stepped outside. The cold mountain air wrapped around them instantly. Jungkook inhaled deeply, feeling it burn slightly in his lungs. It felt clean, almost sharp compared to the city air they were used to breathing. Taehyung whistled softly. "Wow." Above them the sky looked endless. Jimin stepped away from the bus first, tilting his head back as if the stars had called his name. The light from them reflected faintly in his eyes. "I forgot skis could look like this," he murmured. Jungkook watched him quietly. There was something about Jimin in moments like this, away from cameras, away from stages, when the world stopped asking things from them. He looked softer, more real. The others wandered down the roadside, stretching, talking quietly, some taking photos of the sky. Laughter drifted in the cold air. But Jungkook stayed where he was, leaning against the side of the bus, watching Jimin walk farther down the road. Toward the darkness. Toward the edge where the forest opened to a steep mountain drop. Something about that bothered him. Jungkook pushed himself off the bus and followed. "Hey," he called. Jimin didn't turn immediately. He stood near the guardrail looking out over the valley below. Fog drifted between distant ridges like ghostly rivers. When Jungkook reached him, Jimin spoke quietly. "Do you ever think about how strange our lives are?" Jungkook blinked. "That's random." Jimin laughed softly. "Not really." The wind brushed through his hair, carrying the faint scent of pine needles. "We perform in front of thousands of people," Jimin continued. "But moments like this, standing alone on a mountain in the middle of nowhere, feel more real than all of that." Jungkook rested his arms on the cold metal guardrail beside him. For a while neither of them spoke. Somewhere down the road, Taehyung and Hoseok were arguing about constellations. Namjoon was explaining something philosophical to Yoongi, who clearly wasn't listening. It felt normal. Comfortable. But Jungkook's chest felt tight. Because he knew why he had followed Jimin. And he wasn't sure if he had the courage to say it. Jimin suddenly spoke again, softer this time. "You've been quiet lately." Jungkook looked down at the dark valley. "I'm always quiet." "No," Jimin said, "not like this." Silence stretched between them again. Jungkook's fingers tapped nervously against the railing. There were things he never said out loud, thoughts that stayed locked behind smiles and jokes and late-night studio sessions. But tonight felt different. Maybe it was the stars. Maybe it was the stillness. Or maybe it was the fear that moments like this never lasted. "What are you afraid of?" Jimin asked suddenly. Jungkook froze. Jimin finally turned to look at him. His expression wasn't playful anymore. It was serious. Honest. And Jungkook realized something unsettling. Jimin already knew there was something he wasn't saying. Jungkook swallowed. "A lot of things," he admitted. "Like what?" The wind picked up slightly, rustling the trees below them. Jungkook hesitated. Then he spoke quietly. I'm afraid that one day everything we have will disappear. Jimin watched him carefully. The fame. No, Jungkook said. He shook his head slowly. The people. The words hung between them. Down the road, laughter burst from the others again. But here, it felt like the world had narrowed to just the two of them. Jimin leaned back against the railing beside him. You think about that too much. Do you ever think about it? Jungkook asked. Jimin considered the question. Then he nodded. Sometimes. He looked up at the sky again. But I think about something else more. What? Jimin smiled faintly. Whether we're brave enough to be honest with each other before that day comes. Jungkook's chest tightened. The wind brushed across the mountains again. For the first time since the bus stopped, the world felt fragile. Like something important was about to shift. Jungkook turned toward Jimin. His voice dropped to a whisper. Then I should probably tell you something. Jimin looked back at him. What? For a second, Jungkook almost lost his nerve. But something about the quiet mountain night pushed him forward. He leaned closer, his voice barely louder than the wind. I've been afraid, he said, because if I say this, things might change. Jimin didn't move. Say what? Jungkook looked at him fully now. No stage lights. No fans. Just starlight. I think the reason I'm scared of losing everything, Jungkook whispered, is because the one thing I'm most afraid to lose. His voice softened even more. Is you. The words landed gently in the night air. Jimin's breath caught. For a moment, the entire mountain seemed to go silent. Even the wind paused between the trees. Jimin searched Jungkook's face as if trying to understand whether he had heard correctly. But Jungkook didn't look away. He looked relieved. Like he had been carrying those words for years. Jimin let out a slow breath. Then something in his expression changed. Not shock. Not confusion. Something deeper. You idiot, Jimin said softly. Jungkook blinked. What? Jimin laughed quietly, shaking his head. I thought you were going to say something terrifying. Jungkook stared at him. I just confessed my biggest fear and that's your reaction. Jimin's smile softened. You didn't confess fear, he said. He stepped closer, resting his shoulder lightly against Jungkook. You confessed something else. Jungkook frowned slightly. What do you mean? Jimin looked back at the sky. Do you know why this night feels different? Jungkook waited. Because nothing here expects anything from us, Jimin said. No cameras, no fans, no pressure. He turned his head toward Jungkook again. Just honesty. Jungkook felt his heart pounding again. So what does that mean? He asked quietly. Jimin's voice dropped to the same whisper Jungkook had used earlier. It means, he said, you're not the only one who's been afraid. Jungkook's eyes widened slightly. The wind returned, sweeping across the valley. Behind them, the bus engine suddenly roared back to life as the driver fixed the problem. The others cheered. But neither Jungkook nor Jimin moved. Because something between them had already shifted. Not dramatically. Not explosively. But permanently. The stars above the mountain burned quietly as the two of them stood side by side, the cold railing beneath their hands and the endless valley stretching below. And for the first time in a long while, Jungkook didn't feel afraid of what the future might take away. Because some nights didn't end when the bus started moving again. Some nights changed the course of everything. And this was one of them. The bus engine roared back to life, but no one inside noticed that Jungkook and Jimin were still standing far down the road under the cold ocean of stars. The headlights cut through the darkness, spilling pale light across the asphalt and the guardrail where they stood shoulder to shoulder. Hey, Taehyung's voice echoed from the bus door. Are you two planning to live on this mountain now? Jimin exhaled softly and pushed himself off the railing. Looks like our ride, alive again. Jungkook didn't move immediately. Something in his chest was still vibrating from the words he had said. The air felt heavier now, like the world had shifted slightly off its axis. Jimin glanced at him sideways. You coming? He asked. Jungkook nodded once. They walked back slowly. The others were already halfway inside the bus. Hosak was laughing loudly about something Namjoon had said, while Yoongi leaned against the doorframe scrolling through his phone like none of this mattered. But Taehyung noticed the moment Jungkook and Jimin stepped into the light. His eyebrows lifted. "Oh," he said slowly, "you two look suspicious." Jimin groaned immediately, "Here we go." Taehyung crossed his arms dramatically. "You disappeared into the darkness together on a romantic mountain road under the stars and came back looking like that." "Like what?" Jungkook asked. Taehyung leaned closer, studying their faces. "Like something happened." Hosak perked up instantly. "What happened?" Namjoon rubbed his temples. "Please don't start." Yoongi didn't even look up from his phone. "They confessed their undying love. Can we go now?" The bus fell silent for half a second. Taehyung's jaw dropped. Hosak gasped. Namjoon blinked. Yoongi slowly looked up. "Wait," Taehyung said, "was I right?" Jimin's face turned pink immediately. "No." Jungkook coughed awkwardly. "Can we just get on the bus?" But Taehyung was already grinning like a detective who had just cracked the biggest mystery of the year. "You're deflecting." "I'm not," Jungkook said quickly. "You are," Hosak chimed in. Namjoon looked between them thoughtfully. "You were gone a long time," he said. Yoongi leaned back against the doorframe again, eyes narrowing slightly. "Did something actually happen?" Jimin looked like he wanted the ground to open and swallow him. "Nothing happened," he said. Jungkook opened his mouth. Then stopped. Because technically, something had happened. Taehyung noticed the hesitation instantly. "Oh my god," he whispered. Hosak grabbed Taehyung's arm. "What do you know?" Taehyung pointed dramatically at Jungkook. "He almost said something." Jimin grabbed Jungkook's sleeve and yanked him toward the bus door. "We're leaving." The driver laughed nervously. Yes please." They finally climbed inside. The bus pulled back onto the narrow mountain road, headlights slicing through the forest as it slowly descended the winding path. But the atmosphere inside had completely changed. Taehyung spun around in his seat to stare at them. "You cannot just drop that kind of tension into the universe and expect us to ignore it." Jungkook dropped into a seat beside Jimin. "We didn't drop anything." "Oh, you dropped something," Hosak said. Yoongi leaned across the aisle slightly. "So," he said calmly, "who confessed first?" Jimin choked. "No one CNFSSCD." Namjoon adjusted his glasses. "That wasn't a denial." Jimin covered his face. "This is a nightmare." Taehyung slammed his hands on the seat dramatically. "Jaewonjike okay?" Jungkook jumped slightly. "What? What did you say to him?" Jungkook hesitated. The bus hummed softly as it rolled down the mountain road. Outside, the stars were slowly fading behind clouds. Inside, 6 pairs of eyes were now locked onto him. Even Yoongi was paying attention. Jungkook rubbed the back of his neck. "It wasn't a big deal." Taehyung leaned forward like a shark smelling blood. "That sentence means it was absolutely a big deal." Jimin whispered through his hands, "Please don't." But Jungkook was already too deep into the moment. And maybe part of him was tired of hiding things. He sighed. "I just said I was afraid of losing him." The words landed quietly. No one spoke. Hosak blinked slowly. Namjoon looked thoughtful. Taehyung's expression turned from teasing to stunned. Yoongi leaned back again, crossing his arms. "Yeah," he said, "that'll do it." Jimin slowly lowered his hands. His eyes met Jungkook for a split second. Something electric flickered between them. Taehyung whispered, "Bro." Hosak grabbed his own face. "Bro." Namjoon rubbed his chin. "That's surprisingly sincere." Yoongi shrugged. "Kid finally said something honest." Jungkook groaned, "Can we drop this now?" Taehyung pointed aggressively. "Absolutely not." Jimin looked like he might actually jump out of the moving bus. "You guys are making this weird." Taehyung leaned back dramatically. "You made it weird when you had an emotional starlit confession on a mountain road." Jungkook buried his face in his hands. "This was a mistake." But Yoongi's voice cut through the chaos. "Did you answer him?" Everyone froze again. Jimin looked up slowly. Yoongi's gaze was calm but sharp. "You heard what he said," Yoongi continued, "so what did you say back?" The bus felt suddenly smaller. Jimin looked at Jungkook again. That same quiet tension returned between them. I said Jimin started. But he stopped. Because the bus suddenly jerked violently. The driver slammed the brakes. Everyone lurched forward. What the? Hosak shouted. The bus screeched to a stop. Dead silence fell inside. Namjoon grabbed the seat in front of him. Why did we stop? The driver stared through the windshield. His face had gone pale. I didn't see that before, he whispered. Taehyung stood slowly. What? The driver pointed ahead. Everyone turned toward the front window. The narrow mountain road curved around a cliffside. And standing directly in the middle of the road was a figure. Completely still. A person. Or at least something shaped like one. Jungkook's stomach tightened. The headlights illuminated the figure just enough to reveal dark clothing moving slightly in the wind. But the face. The face wasn't visible. Is that someone? Hosak whispered. Namjoon frowned. Why would someone be standing out here? Yoongi's voice dropped. That's not the real question. Everyone looked at him. Yoongi stared through the glass. The real question, he said quietly, is how long they've been there. The figure suddenly moved. Just one slow step forward. The bus filled with tension so thick no one dared breathe. Jimin's fingers unconsciously grabbed Jungkook's sleeve. And Jungkook realized something strange. The figure wasn't just standing in the road. It was looking directly at the bus. Directly at them. Then something even stranger happened. The figure raised one hand slowly. And pointed. Not at the bus. At Jungkook. The bus engine idled in a low mechanical growl, but inside the vehicle no one dared to move. Jungkook felt Jimin's fingers tighten around the fabric of his sleeve. Tell me I'm imagining that, Hosak whispered hoarsely from 2 seats ahead. But no one answered. Because the figure in the road was still pointing. Directly. At Jungkook. The headlights washed over the dark silhouette, stretching its shadow long and crooked across the pavement. Wind pushed through the trees along the mountainside, making the branches sway like restless fingers scratching at the night sky. The driver swallowed hard. Should I honk? Yoongi's voice came low and firm. Don't. Namjoon leaned closer to the windshield, his eyes narrowed. I can't even see the face. Taehyung stood halfway from his seat. Is that a fan? A fan, Hosak whispered, on a mountain road at 2 in the morning. The driver shifted nervously. Maybe someone's car broke down. But Jungkook's chest was tightening for a different reason. The way the figure stood. The way it pointed. It felt deliberate. Personal. Jimin's voice dropped next to him. Jungkook, do you know that person? Jungkook shook his head slowly. No. But something deep inside him twisted uncomfortably, like a memory trying to surface but refusing to show itself. The figure took another step forward. The bus lights illuminated more of its body. Tall. Slim. Wearing a dark coat that moved in the wind. Still pointing. Still silent. Taehyung finally snapped. Okay, this is creepy. Hosak nodded aggressively. This is horror movie behavior. Namjoon exhaled slowly. We should probably ask if they need help. No, Yoongi said immediately. Namjoon glanced back. Why not? Yoongi didn't blink. Because people who need help don't stand in the middle of a mountain road in the dark pointing at someone. The silence returned heavier than before. Jimin's grip on Jungkook tightened again. You're not going out there, he muttered. But before Jungkook could answer, the figure suddenly lowered its arm. Then it began walking toward the bus. Slow. Steady. Each step echoing faintly against the asphalt. The driver panicked slightly. Should I move the bus? Taehyung backed away from the front aisle. Yes. Namjoon hesitated. Wait. The figure stopped just a few meters from the headlights now. For the first time, the light reached its face. And Jungkook's heart dropped into his stomach. No way, he breathed. Jimin looked at him immediately. What? Jungkook stood up slowly. His eyes widened. I know him. Every head snapped toward him. Taehyung blinked. You what? Hosak grabbed the seat. Who is that? Jungkook walked toward the front of the bus as if pulled by something he couldn't explain. The closer he got to the windshield, the clearer the man's face became. Pale. Expressionless. And familiar. Jungkook's voice came out barely above a whisper. Hyunwoo. Namjoon frowned. Hyunwoo. Yoongi's eyes sharpened. You mean the trainee? Jungkook nodded slowly. Yes. A wave of confusion passed through the bus. Taehyung leaned forward. Wait, the guy who disappeared. Hosak's mouth fell open. That Hyunwoo. Jimin's voice turned tense. You told me he quit years ago. Jungkook stared at the figure outside. I thought he did. The man standing in the road finally spoke. Even through the glass, his voice carried strangely clear. Jungkook. The sound of his name in that voice made Jungkook's spine stiffen. Jimin stood up immediately beside him. You're not going out there. But Jungkook was already moving toward the bus door. Jungkook, Namjoon warned. Yoongi spoke quietly. Think carefully. But Jungkook couldn't stop now. Because Hyunwoo had been part of his life once. Back when everything was different. Before debut. Before fame. Back when they were both just trainees chasing impossible dreams. Jungkook stepped down from the bus. Cold wind wrapped around him instantly. Behind him he could hear Jimin jump down too. Jimin, Jungkook muttered. Too late, Jimin said. The others crowded at the bus door watching. Hyunwoo stood still in the headlights. Up close he looked older. Sharper. But his eyes were exactly the same. Dark. Intense. Unsettling. For a long moment the two of them just stared at each other. Then Hyunwoo smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. Long time, he said. Jungkook's throat felt dry. Yeah. Jimin stepped slightly closer to Jungkook. Hyunwoo noticed immediately. His eyes flicked between them. Then he chuckled softly. So it's true. Jungkook frowned. What is? Hyunwoo tilted his head. You really did become the golden one. Taehyung shouted from the bus door. This conversation feels aggressive. Yoongi pulled him back slightly. Let them talk. Hyunwoo's gaze returned to Jungkook. I watched you tonight. Jungkook blinked. What? The concert, Hyunwoo said calmly. That stadium was loud. Jungkook's stomach twisted. You were there. Yes. Jimin's voice turned cold. Then why are you here? Hyunwoo's smile widened slightly. To talk to him. He nodded at Jungkook. Alone. Jimin crossed his arms instantly. Not happening. Hyunwoo laughed softly. You must be Jimin. The way he said the name made Jungkook uncomfortable. You talk about him a lot. Jungkook stiffened. What? Hyunwoo's eyes glimmered strangely. You used to. A tense silence fell. Jimin looked at Jungkook slowly. You talked about me. Jungkook rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. That's not the point. Hyunwoo took one more step forward. You remember what we promised each other back then? He asked Jungkook quietly. Jungkook's chest tightened. Yes. Hyunwoo's smile vanished. But you broke it. The accusation landed like a crack of thunder in the quiet mountain air. Jimin frowned. What promise? Jungkook didn't answer. Hyunwoo's voice hardened. We said we'd debut together. Taehyung whispered from the bus door. Oh no. Jungkook shook his head slowly. You disappeared. Hyunwoo's eyes flashed. No, he said. His voice sharpened with emotion. I was removed. The wind howled suddenly through the trees. Jungkook felt the weight of old memories crashing back. Endless practice rooms. Exhaustion. Competition. Dreams balanced on the edge of failure. You were chosen, Hyunwoo continued quietly. And I was. Jimin stepped forward slightly. That's not Jungkook's fault. Hyunwoo looked at him sharply. But he promised something. Jungkook's voice dropped. We were kids. Hyunwoo's eyes burned. You promised we'd stand on stage together. The words cut through the cold night. Jungkook clenched his fists. I didn't control the company. Hyunwoo laughed bitterly. No. He looked toward the bus where the others watched nervously. You just became the star. Jimin's patience snapped. Enough. His voice was sharper than Jungkook had ever heard. You don't get to show up in the middle of the night and blame him for your life. Hyunwoo studied him calmly. You care about him a lot. Jimin didn't hesitate. Yes. The word hung in the air. Even the guys on the bus went silent. Hyunwoo looked amused now. That explains a lot. Jungkook felt tension building rapidly. Why are you really here? Hyunwoo's expression slowly changed. The bitterness faded. Something darker replaced it. I came, he said quietly, because something is about to happen to you. The wind rushed violently across the road. Jimin frowned. What kind of threat is that? Hyunwoo shook his head slowly. Not a threat. His eyes locked onto Jungkook again. A warning. Jungkook's heartbeat quickened. About what? Hyunwoo leaned slightly closer. His voice dropped to a whisper. About the people who don't want you shining anymore. The word sent a chill down Jungkook's spine. Before anyone could respond, Hyunwoo stepped back into the darkness beyond the headlights. Jimin's eyes widened. Hey. But in the next second, the forest swallowed him completely. He was gone. Just like that. Only the cold mountain road remained. And the uneasy feeling that something much bigger than an old rivalry had just stepped into their lives. For several seconds after Hyunwoo vanished into the darkness, no one moved. The mountain road felt suddenly enormous and empty, the forest pressing in from both sides like a silent audience that had witnessed something it refused to explain. Jungkook was still staring at the place where Hyunwoo had disappeared. Jungkook. Jimin's voice came quietly beside him. But Jungkook didn't answer. Behind them, the bus door slammed open and the others rushed down the steps. Taehyung was the first to reach them. What the hell was that? He demanded, his voice louder than usual, anxiety leaking through his attempt at humor. Hoseok followed close behind, scanning the trees nervously. Where did he go? There's literally nowhere to go out here. Namjoon walked forward more slowly, his mind clearly racing. Jungkook, who exactly was that guy? Yoongi stayed near the bus door, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the darkness like he was expecting something else to emerge. Jungkook finally blinked. The cold air stung his lungs when he inhaled. He trained with me, he said quietly. Taehyung ran a hand through his hair. Yeah, we got that part, but he looked like he crawled out of a thriller movie. Jimin's voice was tight, he was watching the concert. Namjoon frowned, that means he followed us. Hoseok's face twisted, which is not comforting. Yoongi finally stepped forward. Did anyone else notice something weird? He asked calmly. Everyone looked at him. Yoongi nodded toward the forest. That guy didn't walk down the road, he stepped into the trees. Taehyung blinked, so. Yoongi stared at him. Have you tried walking through mountain forest at night? Taehyung's mouth slowly closed. Oh. Namjoon turned toward the trees again. The darkness beyond the headlights looked impenetrable. Dense. Silent. Jimin suddenly spoke again, his tone sharper now. Jungkook. This time Jungkook looked at him. What did he mean? Jungkook hesitated. Jimin stepped closer. You two clearly have history you never told us about. The accusation was quiet but heavy. Taehyung looked between them carefully. Yeah, he said slowly, that didn't feel like a random reunion. Jungkook rubbed his temples. It's not like that. Yoongi's voice cut in, then explain. The tension in the cold night thickened. Jungkook exhaled slowly. Hyunwoo and I were trainees together when I first joined the company. Namjoon nodded slightly, I remember hearing his name back then. Hoseok frowned, but he disappeared before debut. Jungkook nodded. Yeah. Taehyung crossed his arms. Companies don't just make trainees disappear unless something big happened. Jungkook stared down at the asphalt. That's the thing, he said quietly, no one ever told us what happened. The wind pushed through the trees again, carrying the scent of wet leaves and distant rain. Jimin was watching Jungkook carefully now. You said you thought he quit. That's what the managers told us, Jungkook replied. Yoongi tilted his head slightly. And you believed them? Jungkook gave a tired smile. What choice did I have? No one answered that. Because they all knew how the industry worked. Sometimes people simply vanished. Contracts ended. Dreams collapsed. Stories were rewritten. Taehyung kicked a small pebble across the road. But that doesn't explain why he showed up tonight acting like a mysterious villain. Hoseok nodded vigorously, or why he pointed at Jungkook like we're in some kind of prophecy movie. Namjoon looked thoughtful. What exactly did he say before leaving? Jimin answered immediately. He said something was going to happen. Yoongi's eyes darkened slightly. And that some people don't want Jungkook shining anymore. Silence returned. The weight of that sentence lingered in the cold air. Taehyung finally broke it. Well, that's reassuring. Hosak rubbed his arms nervously. I hate mountain roads. Jimin's gaze remained locked on Jungkook. You didn't answer my question earlier. Jungkook sighed. What question? What promise did he mean? Jungkook didn't respond right away. The others waited. The road lights from the bus flickered faintly behind them. Finally Jungkook spoke again. When we were trainees, things were intense. Taehyung snorted. That's the nicest way I've ever heard someone describe trainee life. Jungkook continued anyway. We practiced until we could barely stand. Everyone was competing for the same spots. His voice lowered slightly. Hyunwoo was good. Namjoon nodded, better than most. Yeah, Jungkook said. Jimin watched him closely. So you were rivals? Jungkook shook his head. Not exactly. He hesitated again. We helped each other a lot. Taehyung blinked. You. Jungkook gave a small shrug. We were both younger than most of the others, we stuck together. Jimin's expression softened slightly. So what was the promise? Jungkook looked at the stars that were now slowly disappearing behind thick clouds. We used to say we'd debut together. Hosak sighed quietly. That's actually kind of sad. Yoongi's voice remained neutral. Lots of trainees say things like that. Jungkook nodded. Yeah. But his eyes were distant. Except Hyunwoo believed it. The wind picked up again, colder now. Taehyung looked uneasy. Okay, but that still doesn't explain why he's suddenly appearing like some revenge ghost. Namjoon rubbed his chin. He didn't sound like he wanted revenge. Jimin nodded slowly. He sounded worried. Yoongi looked back toward the forest. Or he wanted us to think that. Jungkook suddenly shivered. Because Yoongi's words echoed something that had bothered him since the moment Hyunwoo appeared. There had been something strange in his eyes. Not just anger. Not just bitterness. Fear. Jungkook turned toward the bus. Maybe we should leave. The driver immediately nodded, yes please. They began climbing back into the bus. But just before Jungkook stepped onto the first stair, something caught his eye on the road. A small object lying near the guardrail where Hyunwoo had stood. Jungkook frowned. What's that? Jimin followed his gaze. Did he drop something? Jungkook walked toward it slowly. Taehyung groaned, why are we investigating things at 2 in the morning? Jungkook crouched and picked it up. It was cold. Metal. A small silver flash drive. Jimin leaned closer. Did he leave that? Jungkook turned it over in his hand. There was a tiny sticker on it. Faded. But still readable. A trainee practice room number. Room B12. Jungkook's stomach twisted. That had been their old practice room. Behind them Yoongi stepped closer. What is it? Jungkook held up the flash drive. Something he wanted me to find. Namjoon frowned, you think that's what his dramatic warning was about? Yoongi looked at the device thoughtfully. Only one way to find out. Taehyung groaned again. Oh great, a mysterious USB drive left by a guy who appears in the woods at night. Hosak pointed toward the bus urgently. Can we open it somewhere that isn't a mountain? Jimin placed a hand lightly on Jungkook's arm. His voice was quiet. Let's go back first. Jungkook nodded slowly. But as he stepped back onto the bus, the uneasy feeling inside his chest grew stronger. Because Hyunwoo hadn't just come to talk. He had left something behind. Something he clearly wanted Jungkook to see. And for some reason, that felt far more dangerous than anything he had said out loud. The bus doors closed with a heavy hiss, sealing the cold mountain air outside, but the tension followed them in like an invisible passenger. No one returned to their earlier seats right away. Instead, they gathered around the small table near the middle of the bus where Jungkook had placed the flash drive. It looked harmless. Small. Ordinary. But the silence surrounding it made it feel like a live grenade. Taehyung leaned over the table, squinting at it as if it might suddenly grow legs and run away. I hate this already. Hosak nodded vigorously, same. Namjoon folded his arms thoughtfully. Hyunwoo clearly wanted Jungkook to find it. Yoongi dropped into the seat across from Jungkook, watching the flash drive without blinking. That's the part that bothers me. Jimin sat beside Jungkook close enough that their shoulders touched. His voice was quiet but firm. Don't plug it in yet. The driver began steering the bus slowly down the winding mountain road again, but the rumble of the engine only made the atmosphere heavier. Jungkook looked at the flash drive. His fingers hovered above it. Why would he leave this? Taehyung shrugged nervously, because mysterious extrainees love dramatic USB drives. Hosak rubbed his temples. This feels like the start of a documentary scandal. Namjoon nodded slowly. Or a warning. Yoongi's voice cut in. Or bait. Everyone looked at him. Yoongi leaned back in his seat. You all heard what he said. Some people don't want you shining anymore. The words hung in the air again. Jungkook exhaled slowly. You think someone is targeting me? Taehyung threw his hands up. You're literally one of the most famous idols on the planet. Of course someone might be targeting you. Hosak pointed at him. Thank you for saying that so calmly. Namjoon adjusted his glasses. If this contains something dangerous, Hyunwoo might be trying to expose it. Jimin shook his head. Or manipulate us. Jungkook finally picked up the flash drive. It felt heavier than something so small should feel. I'm opening it. Jimin grabbed his wrist instantly. Wait. Jungkook looked at him. Jimin's eyes were sharp. Think about this, a guy we haven't seen in years appears in the middle of a mountain road, warns us about some shadowy threat and leaves a mysterious device. Taehyung nodded. Yeah, when you say it like that it sounds insane. Jimin continued quietly. You don't even know if this thing is safe. Yoongi shrugged. It's a flash drive, not a bomb. Hosak muttered, computers can explode too. Namjoon leaned forward. Let's check it on a separate laptop first. Taehyung pointed at him, leader energy. Jungkook hesitated. But curiosity was already burning through him. Something about Hyunwoo's eyes earlier had been real. Too real to ignore. He turned to Namjoon. Do you have your laptop? Namjoon reached into his bag and slowly pulled it out. The others gathered closer as he placed it on the table and powered it on. The screen lit the bus interior with a pale glow. Outside, the mountain road curved through darkness. Inside, 7 people leaned toward one tiny device like it contained the answer to something none of them understood yet. Namjoon held out his hand. Jungkook gave him the flash drive. Last chance to back out, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook shook his head. No. Namjoon inserted the drive. For a moment nothing happened. Then the folder appeared. Just one file. Taehyung leaned in closer. That's suspiciously simple. The file name made Jungkook's stomach tighten. Project Lumen. Hosak frowned. That sounds like a sci-fi villain. Yoongi nodded slightly, or a corporate code name. Namjoon double-clicked the file. The video began playing immediately. The screen filled with a dimly lit room. Grainy security camera footage. A conference room. Several men sitting around a table. Their faces were partially visible. The camera angle was high, like it had been secretly recorded. Taehyung whispered, "Why does this feel illegal?" Then one of the men spoke. And Jungkook froze. Because he recognized the voice. Namjoon stiffened too. That's one of the company directors. Jimin's eyes widened. The conversation and the video continued. The director leaned forward across the table. The problem isn't the group, he said. The problem is Jungkook. The bus went completely silent. Jungkook's heart began pounding violently. Hosak whispered, "What the hell?" Another man spoke. He's too powerful now. Taehyung looked like someone had slapped him. Too powerful. The director sighed. His influence over the brand is becoming dangerous. Namjoon's jaw tightened. What are they talking about? The video continued. Another voice joined in. If we can't control him, we control the narrative. Jimin's hand slowly clenched. Yoongi leaned forward slightly. Listen carefully. The director spoke again. We start subtle rumors, conflicts, scandals if necessary. The words dropped like stones. Hoseok whispered in disbelief. They're planning to destroy him. Jungkook's chest felt like it was collapsing inward. He stared at the screen, unable to breathe. Another man in the video said quietly, "If Jungkook falls, the entire structure shifts." Taehyung slammed his hand on the table. "What structure?" But the video kept going. The director leaned back calmly. "And we have leverage." Namjoon's voice came out tight. "What leverage?" Then the man answered. "His relationships." Jimin's body went rigid beside Jungkook. The director continued coldly. "Especially the one he's been hiding." The bus fell into stunned silence. Jungkook's pulse roared in his ears. Taehyung slowly turned toward him. "What relationship?" Jimin's breathing had become shallow. On the screen, the director continued. "We released the evidence at the right moment." Namjoon whispered, "Evidence of what?" Then the video cut suddenly. The file ended. The laptop screen went black. No one spoke. The only sound was the hum of the bus engine. Taehyung finally broke the silence. His voice was barely audible. "Jungkook." Jungkook still hadn't moved. Jimin was staring at him now. Not angry. Not accusing. Just searching. "Is there something they know about you?" Jungkook swallowed. His hands were shaking slightly. His voice cracked. "I don't know." But Yoongi was watching both Jungkook and Jimin carefully now. And his voice came out low and serious. They weren't guessing. Everyone turned to him. Yoongi's gaze hardened. They sounded very sure. The tension between Jungkook and Jimin suddenly became impossible to ignore. Taehyung whispered slowly. "Wait." His eyes moved between them. "No way." Hoseok looked confused. "What?" Taehyung pointed a shaky finger. "You too." The bus seemed to hold its breath. Jimin's face slowly flushed. "Taehyung." But Taehyung shook his head. "Don't." His voice was quieter now. "But tell me I'm wrong." Jungkook looked down. And that silence said more than any words could. Hoseok's eyes widened in shock. Namjoon closed his eyes briefly. Yoongi just sighed. Because in that moment they all understood the same terrifying thing. The people in that video hadn't been bluffing. They knew exactly where to strike. And the secret they were planning to use against Jungkook was sitting right beside him on that bus. For several long seconds after the video ended, the bus felt like it had lost oxygen. No one spoke. No one moved. The laptop screen reflected dim light across their faces, making every expression look sharper, more fragile. Taehyung was the first to break. He leaned back slowly in his seat, staring at Jungkook and Jimin like he had just discovered a secret the universe had been hiding in plain sight. "You're serious?" His voice wasn't loud, but it cut straight through the silence. Jungkook's fingers were still resting on the table beside the laptop. They trembled slightly before he curled them into a fist. Jimin's eyes were locked on the floor. Hoseok looked between them like his brain was trying to assemble a puzzle with missing pieces. "Wait," he said carefully, wait. His voice rose slightly with each word. "You're telling me that what that video just implied is actually..." He gestured wildly between Jungkook and Jimin. "Real." Namjoon slowly exhaled through his nose. He had suspected things before, small moments, glances, silences that lingered too long. But suspicion and confirmation were two completely different earthquakes. Yoongi leaned back in his seat with the calm expression of someone who had just watched a secret explode exactly the way he expected it to. "So that's the leverage," he muttered. Taehyung slapped his hands over his face. "Are you kidding me?" Jimin finally lifted his head. His voice came out low. "Taehyung." Taehyung dropped his hands and stared at him. "How long?" The question landed hard. Jimin hesitated. Jungkook's jaw tightened. Hoseok whispered, "Oh my god, it's real." Namjoon rubbed his forehead. "You too, seriously?" Jimin's eyes flicked toward Jungkook for a split second. Then he answered. "Not exactly how you think." Taehyung threw his arms into the air. "What does that even mean?" Yoongi spoke calmly. "It means they never told us." His gaze shifted to Jungkook. "And they never told the company either." Jungkook finally spoke. They can't know. Namjoon looked at the laptop again. They clearly do. The words hit like cold water. Jimin stood up suddenly and walked toward the back of the bus. Great, he muttered under his breath. Jungkook immediately followed him. Jimin. Not now, Jimin said quietly. But Jungkook grabbed his arm before he could walk further. Please. Jimin stopped. The others watched the moment unfold from the table, none of them brave enough to interrupt now. Jimin turned slowly. His eyes were sharp. You said they didn't know. Jungkook's voice cracked slightly. I thought they didn't. Jimin laughed softly. But it wasn't amusement. It was frustration. Well, apparently they've been watching us better than we thought. Taehyung whispered from the table, this is insane. Hoseok nodded rapidly, this is actually insane. Namjoon stood up and walked toward them. Listen, he said carefully, we need to think clearly. Jimin turned toward him. You just watched a video of executives planning to ruin Jungkook's life. Namjoon nodded slowly. Yes. And you want calm thinking. Namjoon didn't flinch. Yes. Jungkook leaned against the wall of the bus, running a hand through his hair. Everything felt like it was collapsing too fast. Hyunwoo. The video. The secret that was apparently not as secret as they thought. Yoongi's voice drifted from the table again. There's a bigger question. Everyone looked at him. He tapped the laptop. Why did Hyunwoo give this to us? Silence fell again. Taehyung frowned. To warn Jungkook. Yoongi shook his head. No. His eyes moved toward Jungkook. To force him to act. Hoseok blinked. Act how? Yoongi leaned forward slightly. Think about it, if this video is real, the company is already preparing a scandal. Namjoon nodded slowly. And once they release it, Jungkook loses control of the narrative. Jimin crossed his arms tightly. So what are you saying? Yoongi's voice stayed calm. I'm saying Hyunwoo just handed us proof. Taehyung's eyes widened. Proof we can use against them. Namjoon looked back at the laptop. But using it would start a war. The word lingered in the air. War. Hoseok rubbed his face nervously. We're talking about one of the biggest entertainment companies in the world. Yoongi shrugged. And they're talking about destroying one of their own artists. Jungkook finally pushed himself away from the wall. His voice was quiet but firm. I don't want a war. Jimin looked at him. But they already started one. Jungkook met his eyes. Pain flickered there. I don't want you dragged into it. Jimin laughed softly again. You think I'm not already in it? Those words hit harder than anything else. Taehyung spoke cautiously. So just to clarify something. Everyone turned toward him. You two are actually. He gestured awkwardly again. Together. Jungkook and Jimin both froze. For a moment neither answered. Then Jimin said quietly. It's complicated. Taehyung groaned loudly. That is not a real answer. Hoseok looked overwhelmed. Okay, I need context, years of context. Namjoon spoke gently. You don't have to explain everything right now. But Jimin surprised them. No, he said. His voice was calm now. They deserve the truth. Jungkook looked at him. Jimin continued. It wasn't planned. Taehyung muttered, they never are. Jimin shot him a look but continued. It just happened slowly. Hoseok leaned forward intensely. How slowly? Jungkook sighed. Years. That answer made the entire bus explode. Years, Taehyung shouted. Hoseok grabbed his head. You've been hiding this for years. Namjoon stared in disbelief. During promotions. Yoongi raised an eyebrow. Impressive. Jimin looked exhausted now. You see why we couldn't tell anyone. Taehyung paced the aisle dramatically. This is the biggest secret in K-pop history. Hoseok pointed at Jungkook. And the company has proof. Jungkook's chest tightened again. That's the problem. Namjoon looked back at the laptop. If they release that. Taehyung stopped packing. The media will destroy you. Jimin spoke quietly. Not just him. Everyone understood what he meant. It would destroy both of them. And maybe the group. The bus rolled through another curve in the mountain road. Rain had begun tapping lightly against the windows now. Yoongi finally stood up. His voice carried the calm weight of someone who had already decided something. Then we stopped them. Namjoon looked at him carefully. How? Yoongi gestured toward the laptop. With this. Taehyung frowned. You want to leak the video? Yoongi shrugged. If they're planning to use a scandal, we expose their plan first. Hoseok looked terrified. That could end our careers. Yoongi met Jungkook's eyes. Or save them. Jungkook didn't answer immediately. Because the weight of the decision felt enormous. Outside the bus, thunder rolled across the mountains. Inside, every single person was staring at him. Waiting. Jimin stepped closer. His voice was soft. You don't have to decide tonight. Jungkook looked at him. But whatever happens. Jimin held his gaze. We face it together. The bus continued driving through the storm, carrying 7 people deeper into a future none of them could predict anymore. And somewhere far behind them on that silent mountain road, Hyunwoo was probably watching the storm roll in. Rain began falling harder as the bus descended the mountain road, each drop striking the windows with sharp, restless taps that sounded almost like fingers trying to get inside. Inside the bus, no one had returned to their normal seats. The table in the center had become the gravity point of the entire night. Namjoon was still standing beside the laptop, staring at the dark screen as if the video might suddenly start playing again by itself. Taehyung paced back and forth down the aisle like a caged animal. Hoseok sat with his elbows on his knees, gripping his hair with both hands. Yoongi leaned against the seat quietly, watching everyone with that calm, calculating gaze that meant his mind was already 10 steps ahead. And near the back of the bus, Jungkook and Jimin stood facing each other in a silence that felt heavier than the storm outside. Jungkook finally spoke. You should have told them. Jimin blinked. What? Jungkook ran his hand through his wet hair, frustration slipping through his voice. You should have told them years ago. Jimin stared at him like he couldn't believe what he had just heard. You're blaming me right now. Jungkook immediately shook his head. No, that's not what I. But Jimin's voice had already sharpened. Because if I remember correctly, you're the one who said we had to keep it secret. Taehyung stopped packing immediately. Hoseok slowly looked up. Namjoon glanced toward them with quiet concern. The argument was starting. Jungkook lowered his voice. Jimin, that was before this. Jimin laughed once, bitter and short. Before this. He gestured toward the laptop across the bus. You mean before your company executives secretly filmed meetings about destroying your life? Jungkook clenched his fists. That's exactly what I mean. The rain outside intensified, thunder rolling through the mountains like distant explosions. Taehyung whispered to Hoseok, this is bad. Hoseok nodded slowly, very bad. Jimin crossed his arms tightly. You think telling them earlier would have changed anything? Jungkook didn't answer immediately. Because part of him knew the truth. Maybe it wouldn't have. But right now, everything felt like it was collapsing and he needed something to hold responsible. I don't know, Jungkook said quietly. Jimin shook his head. No, you do know. His voice dropped lower. You're scared. Jungkook looked up. Of course I'm scared. Jimin stepped closer. No, not of the company. His eyes burned now. You're scared of what happens if everyone finds out about us. The accusation hit like a punch. Jungkook stared at him. That's not true. Then why, Jimin asked softly, did we spend years pretending nothing was happening? The bus fell completely silent again. Taehyung didn't even breathe. Jungkook's voice came out strained. Because we had to. Jimin shook his head slowly. No, because you wanted to. The words cut deep. Jungkook took a step forward. That's not fair. Jimin's voice rose slightly. Isn't it? Namjoon finally spoke from the table. Guys. But neither of them heard him. Jungkook's frustration burst out. You think this is easy for me? Jimin's reply came instantly. No, I think it's easy for you to hide. The words echoed through the bus. Taehyung winced. Hoseok whispered, oh no. Jungkook's face hardened. I didn't hide you. Jimin laughed again. Really? His voice shook now, emotion rising. Because the world knows every detail of your life except the fact that the person standing next to you every day is the one you care about most. Jungkook looked like he had been struck. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain battered the bus windows like applause for the argument. Yoongi finally pushed himself off the seat and walked toward them. His voice was calm. Stop. They both looked at him. Yoongi's eyes moved between them carefully. You're fighting the wrong enemy. Jimin exhaled sharply and turned away, running a hand through his hair. Jungkook leaned back against the wall, his chest rising and falling too fast. Namjoon stepped closer. This is exactly what the people in that video want. Taehyung nodded quickly. Yes, emotional collapse, very effective sabotage. Hoseok added quietly, they want you two separated. Jimin looked back at Jungkook slowly. His anger hadn't vanished, but something softer had replaced it. Maybe they're right. Jungkook's head snapped up. What? Jimin's voice was quieter now. Maybe we should separate. The words landed like a bomb. Taehyung actually gasped. Absolutely not. Hoseok jumped up, that's a terrible idea. Namjoon looked alarmed. Jimin. But Jimin continued. If the company wants leverage, removing the leverage solves the problem. Jungkook stared at him in disbelief. You're serious? Jimin didn't answer immediately. His eyes flickered with conflict. Pain. Fear. Then he said something that made Jungkook's chest tighten. I don't want to be the reason your life gets destroyed. Jungkook stepped forward instantly. You're not. But I could be, Jimin replied quietly. Taehyung groaned loudly. This is the worst strategy meeting ever. Yoongi sighed. Enough. Everyone turned toward him. His expression was calm but firm. You're both thinking emotionally, that's exactly what the company expects. Namjoon nodded slowly. They're counting on panic. Yoongi looked at Jungkook. Hyunwoo didn't give you that video so you could break up dramatically on a tour bus. Jimin frowned. Then why did he give it? Yoongi's eyes darkened slightly. To make you angry. Jungkook blinked. What? Yoongi leaned closer to the table again. Think about it, Hyunwoo spent years watching from the outside, he knows how this industry works. Taehyung tilted his head. So he gave us ammunition. Namjoon nodded slowly. Yes. Hoseok's eyes widened. Meaning? Yoongi finished the sentence calmly. We exposed them first. The idea hung in the air again. Jungkook looked at the laptop. If we release that video. Namjoon continued the thought. The company will lose control of the narrative. Taehyung's eyes sparkled with dangerous excitement. That would be the biggest scandal in entertainment history. Hoseok looked half terrified and half impressed. We'd be declaring war. Yoongi looked at Jungkook. Yes. Jimin spoke quietly. And if we lose that war? No one answered immediately. Because the answer was obvious. Everything. Careers. Reputations. Years of work. All of it could collapse. Jungkook looked around the bus at the people who had shared every stage of his life. Then he looked at Jimin. His voice came out steady. I'm not letting them use you against me. Jimin's eyes softened. Jungkook continued. Not now, not ever. Thunder cracked loudly outside the bus. Taehyung slowly smiled. Well, he said quietly, this just became the most dangerous tour of our lives. Yoongi nodded once. Yes. Namjoon closed the laptop gently. The decision hadn't been made yet. But the direction was clear. The storm outside the bus raged through the mountains. And somewhere far away, powerful people believed they still controlled the story. They didn't know yet that the story was about to fight back. The storm followed them all the way down the mountain. By the time the bus reached the highway, rain was pouring so heavily that the world outside the windows looked like a blurred painting of lights and shadows. Inside the bus, no one was sleeping. The argument between Jungkook and Jimin had quieted, but the tension it left behind still lingered like static in the air. Namjoon sat at the table with the laptop closed in front of him, fingers folded together, deep in thought. Taehyung had finally stopped packing but was now sprawled across two seats, staring at the ceiling like his brain was still trying to process everything. Hoseok sat beside him, occasionally muttering small shocked noises under his breath as if the entire situation still hadn't fully registered. Yoongi leaned near the window, headphones around his neck but not playing anything, watching the rain streak down the glass. And at the back of the bus, Jungkook and Jimin sat several seats apart. Not far, but not close either. The silence between them felt fragile. Jungkook was staring at his phone without really seeing the screen. Jimin's arms were folded tightly, his gaze fixed on the dark highway ahead. Neither of them had spoken since the argument. Taehyung suddenly sat up. I have a question. Everyone looked at him. Hoseok groaned softly, do we want to hear it? Taehyung ignored him. If the company is planning to destroy Jungkook, why now? Namjoon lifted his eyes. That's a good question. Yoongi answered calmly. Because he's too big. Taehyung blinked. Too big. Yoongi nodded toward Jungkook. He's the center of the brand, fans trust him, the public trusts him. Namjoon continued the thought slowly. If Jungkook ever decided to challenge them. Hoseok's eyes widened. The company would lose control. Taehyung whistled quietly. So they're trying to control him before that happens. Yoongi shrugged slightly. Or remove him from the equation. Jimin finally spoke again. That video didn't sound like they were planning something small. Namjoon nodded. They mentioned rumors, scandals. Hoseok shivered. They'll try to destroy his reputation first. Taehyung glanced back at Jungkook. Which means the relationship thing is their nuclear option. Jungkook finally looked up. His voice was quiet. They wouldn't hesitate to use it. Jimin turned slightly toward him. His expression softened, but the earlier tension was still there. Then we need to move faster than them. Namjoon leaned forward. Yoongi's idea might be our only real move. Taehyung frowned. Leaking the video. Namjoon nodded. If the public sees that executives were planning to manipulate Jungkook's career. Hoseok finished the sentence. The company becomes the villain. Yoongi spoke again. And villains lose leverage. The logic was cold. Strategic. But terrifying. Taehyung exhaled slowly. That's still a massive risk. Jimin looked back toward the table. And once that war starts, there's no undoing it. Jungkook stood up suddenly. Everyone turned toward him. He walked toward the front of the bus slowly. The highway lights flickered across his face through the windshield. Namjoon followed him with his eyes. What are you thinking? Jungkook didn't answer immediately. The bus hummed steadily as it cut through the storm. Finally he spoke. I'm thinking about Hyunwoo. Taehyung tilted his head. The mysterious mountain ghost. Jungkook nodded slightly. He didn't just appear randomly. Yoongi agreed quietly. He planned that. Jungkook continued. He knew exactly where we'd stop. Namjoon's expression darkened. Which means someone told him our route. Hoseok sat up straight. Wait. His eyes widened slowly. You think someone in the company helped him? Yoongi looked thoughtful. Possible. Taehyung rubbed his chin dramatically. So Hyunwoo becomes our mysterious insider source. Jimin stood up and walked toward Jungkook. Or he's playing his own game. Jungkook glanced at him. You think he's lying? Jimin shrugged slightly. I think we barely know what he wants. The bus suddenly hit a pothole, shaking the entire vehicle. The driver cursed quietly under his breath. Outside, lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the highway for a split second like daylight. Hoseok flinched. I hate storms. Taehyung leaned forward suddenly. Wait. Everyone looked at him again. What? Taehyung's eyes were wide. The video. Namjoon frowned. What about it? Taehyung pointed at the laptop. They said they had evidence. The realization moved across the bus slowly. Jimin spoke first. Evidence of our relationship. Taehyung nodded. But we just saw one video. Hoseok's stomach dropped. You think there's more? Yoongi answered quietly. There's always more. Jungkook felt a chill run down his spine. Because Yoongi was probably right. If the company had been watching him closely enough to discuss his private life in secret meetings. Then they had probably been collecting proof for a long time. Photos, messages, videos. Jimin spoke softly. They could ruin everything. Namjoon looked at the dark highway ahead. That's the point. Jungkook turned toward Jimin slowly. Then we stop them before they can. Jimin held his gaze. And how exactly do we do that? Jungkook hesitated. Because that was the question none of them had an answer to yet. Just then Yoongi's phone buzzed. The sound cut through the bus like a blade. He glanced down at the screen. And his expression changed instantly. Namjoon noticed. What is it? Yoongi didn't answer immediately. He looked at Jungkook. Then at Jimin. Then back at the phone. Finally he said something that made the entire bus fall silent again. Hyunwoo just texted me. Every single head snapped toward him. Taehyung sat upright. You have his number. Yoongi ignored the question. He read the message slowly. His voice came out low. He says. Yoongi's eyes lifted toward Jungkook. They already started. The storm outside roared louder against the bus. Jungkook's heart pounded. What does that mean? Yoongi turned the phone screen toward them. A news alert glowed on the display. Breaking news. Major entertainment company facing internal scandal allegations. Namjoon grabbed the phone. His eyes widened as he read. Taehyung whispered, no way. Hosak leaned closer. Oh my god. Namjoon looked up slowly. The video. Jimin's voice dropped to a whisper. Someone already leaked it. The bus filled with stunned silence. Because none of them had touched the file yet. And that meant only one thing. Somewhere out there in the stormy night, Hyunwoo had just fired the first shot in a war that was about to shake the entire industry. The bus slowed as the rain began to thin, but the storm inside the vehicle had only grown louder. Namjoon was still holding Yoongi's phone, his eyes scanning the news alert again and again as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less explosive. But they didn't. The headline glowed on the screen like a flare in the dark. Major entertainment company facing internal scandal allegations. Taehyung leaned over Namjoon's shoulder. Scroll. Namjoon did. More headlines appeared. Leaked video shows executives plotting against top idol. Industry in shock over secret recording. Corporate manipulation allegations rock K-pop giant. Hosak covered his mouth. Oh my god, it's everywhere. Jimin stepped closer, his heart beating faster with every word. Let me see. Namjoon handed him the phone. Jimin read quickly, his face tightening as he reached the part that made his stomach twist. The video hasn't been confirmed authentic, he read aloud quietly, but insiders say it appears to show senior executives discussing plans to damage the public image of a major artist. Taehyung let out a low whistle. That's not subtle at all. Yoongi crossed his arms. Hyunwoo didn't waste time. Jungkook was standing near the front of the bus, staring out the windshield at the wet highway rushing beneath them. For a moment he felt like the ground beneath his life had shifted permanently. Does it say my name? He asked. Jimin scrolled further down. No. Everyone looked at him. Jimin continued reading carefully. They're calling the artist an unnamed top idol. Namjoon nodded slowly. That means they're protecting you for now. Taehyung raised an eyebrow. Or they just don't have confirmation yet. Hosak whispered nervously, fans will figure it out. Yoongi nodded once. Fans always figure it out. Jimin lowered the phone and looked at Jungkook. His voice was quiet. This is already bigger than we thought. The bus rolled off the highway and into the sleeping outskirts of the city. Streetlights reflected off wet asphalt like long ribbons of gold. Inside the bus no one relaxed. Taehyung suddenly clapped his hands once. Well. Everyone looked at him. The war has officially started. Namjoon exhaled slowly. Yes. Jungkook turned back toward them. His expression was calm, but something in his eyes had hardened. Hyunwoo forced their hand. Yoongi nodded. They'll be scrambling right now. Hosak frowned. Scrambling to do what? Yoongi answered simply. Control the damage. Namjoon added quietly, which means they'll start looking for the source. Taehyung's eyes widened. Oh. Hosak groaned. They're going to hunt down whoever leaked the video. Jimin glanced at Yoongi. And Hyunwoo just contacted you. Yoongi shrugged. He's not exactly hiding. Jungkook walked back toward the table slowly. Do you trust him? Yoongi thought about it for a moment. No. Taehyung nodded immediately. Correct answer. Yoongi continued calmly. But that doesn't mean he's our enemy. Namjoon sat down again. We need to think about our next move before the company does. Hosak blinked. Our move? Namjoon looked up at him. The media will start asking questions by morning. Taehyung groaned loudly. Oh no. Hosak buried his face in his hands. They're going to ask us directly. Jimin spoke quietly. They'll ask Jungkook first. Jungkook nodded. Of course. Namjoon's voice was steady. So we need to decide now what the story is. Silence fell again. Taehyung slowly raised a finger. I vote for the truth. Hosak looked horrified. The whole truth. Taehyung shrugged. Why not? Yoongi looked unimpressed. Because truth without strategy is suicide. Jimin leaned against the seat beside Jungkook. And if we lie? Namjoon answered carefully. Then we become part of the cover-up. The words hung in the air. Jungkook stared down at the table. For years he had followed the rules. Stay quiet. Protect the brand. Protect the company. Protect the image. But tonight had shattered something. He looked up slowly. They were planning to destroy me. Namjoon nodded. Yes. They were going to use Jimin against me. Jimin didn't say anything. But his hand tightened slightly on the edge of the seat. Jungkook's voice became firmer. I'm not protecting them anymore. Taehyung's face lit up. Okay, that was cool. Hosak whispered that was very cool. Yoongi nodded once. So we fight. Namjoon raised a hand slightly. Carefully. Jimin looked at Jungkook. Are you sure? Jungkook met his eyes. If they want to expose my life. He hesitated for just a second. Then maybe I stop hiding it. The bus went completely still. Taehyung blinked. Wait. Hosak blinked harder. Wait. Namjoon looked stunned. You mean? Jimin stared at Jungkook in disbelief. You're talking about telling everyone. Jungkook didn't look away from him. I'm talking about not letting them use you as a weapon. Jimin's chest tightened. That would change everything. Taehyung muttered under his breath. That would break the internet. Hosak whispered the internet would explode. Yoongi's gaze sharpened. You realize what that means. Jungkook nodded slowly. I know. Years of secrets. Years of careful distance in public. Years of pretending. All of it could vanish in a single moment. Jimin looked at him carefully. His voice dropped softer. You don't have to do that for me. Jungkook shook his head. I'm not doing it for you. Jimin frowned slightly. Then why? Jungkook gave a small tired smile. Because I'm tired of being afraid. The words lingered between them. Taehyung whispered to Hosak, this is either heroic or catastrophic. Hosak whispered back, possibly both. Namjoon stood slowly. We shouldn't rush this decision. Yoongi agreed. Once it's public, there's no going back. Jimin looked down for a moment. Then back up at Jungkook. If we do this. His voice trembled slightly. It changes our lives forever. Jungkook stepped closer. Everything already changed tonight. The bus pulled into the quiet parking garage of their hotel. The engine shut off. For the first time in hours, the world outside was silent. No rain. No thunder. Just the hum of distant city lights. But inside the bus, the moment still burned. Because standing in the middle of that narrow aisle were two people who had just realized that the secret they had protected for years might soon belong to the entire world. And somewhere in the city beyond the hotel walls, reporters were already chasing a story that was about to become bigger than anyone was ready for. The hotel garage was quiet in a way that felt almost unreal after the storm. The bus doors opened slowly and cool night air drifted inside, carrying the distant hum of the city. No reporters were there yet, no cameras, no chaos, just a silent moment between what had happened and what would come next. No one moved right away. The seven of them remained inside the bus, as if stepping out would mean stepping into a completely different life. Taehyung finally exhaled loudly and leaned back in his seat. Well, he muttered, that escalated quickly. Hosak let out a nervous laugh, though his eyes still carried worry. From mountain road breakdown to corporate war in one night. Namjoon closed the laptop carefully and slid it back into his bag. His voice was steady but softer now. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Yoongi nodded once, his calm expression returning. That's the only way this group ever survived anything. Those words settled something in the air. Years of music, pressure, and shared battles had built something stronger than fear. Jimin finally stood. For a moment he just looked at Jungkook. All the anger from earlier had faded, leaving something quieter and more honest behind. "You're really serious about what you said?" Jimin asked gently. Jungkook didn't hesitate. "Yes." Jimin studied his face carefully, searching for doubt. But he didn't find any. Only exhaustion. And determination. "You know the world might not be kind about it," Jimin said. Jungkook smiled faintly. "The world has never really been kind." Taehyung slowly sat up again, watching the two of them like someone witnessing a moment he knew he'd remember forever. Hosak whispered beside him, "This is historic." Taehyung nodded. "Absolutely historic." Namjoon stepped forward. His voice carried the quiet strength of a leader who had guided them through countless storms. "We don't have to rush into a press conference tomorrow," he said carefully, "but we also don't run from the truth." Yoongi added calmly, "And we don't let anyone weaponize it." Jungkook looked at them all. Every face in that bus had stood beside him through the hardest years of his life. Through success. Through exhaustion. Through doubt. Now they were standing beside him again. That realization steadied his breathing. He turned back to Jimin. For years they had been careful. Careful with words. Careful with glances. Careful with every moment that might reveal too much. But tonight something had shifted. The silence between them wasn't fear anymore. It was freedom waiting to happen. Jungkook spoke quietly. "I spent a long time thinking protecting everyone meant hiding everything." Jimin listened without interrupting. "But tonight," Jungkook continued, "I realized hiding doesn't actually protect anything." Jimin's eyes softened. "It just postpones the moment you have to face it." Jungkook nodded. "Exactly." Taehyung leaned back dramatically again. "I cannot believe the climax of this entire night is a philosophical conversation." Hosak nudged him. "Let them have their moment." Jimin stepped a little closer to Jungkook. Not touching, but close enough that the distance no longer felt like a wall. "We'll figure it out," Jimin said quietly. "Together." Jungkook nodded. "Together." For the first time since the mountain road, the tension in his chest loosened. Outside the bus, the city lights reflected off wet pavement like 1,000 tiny stars. Somewhere out there, the media storm was already building. Headlines would spread. Speculation would explode. Questions would come from every direction. But for this one quiet moment inside the bus, none of that mattered yet. Namjoon opened the bus door. "Come on," he said gently, "let's go inside before someone recognizes the bus." One by one they stepped out. Taehyung stretched his arms dramatically as his shoes hit the pavement. "Well," he said, looking up at the clearing sky, "this tour just became legendary." Hosag laughed softly. "I feel like we survived a thriller movie." Yoongi slipped his hands into his pockets. "It's only the first act." Namjoon shook his head with a small smile. "Let's hope the next act is calmer." Jimin stepped down last. Jungkook followed. For a brief moment they stood side by side in the quiet garage, watching the city breathe around them. The world beyond those walls would soon know their story. But right now it was still theirs. Jungkook glanced at Jimin. Jimin met his gaze. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Because under the memory of that silent mountain road, under the stars that had witnessed everything begin, one simple truth had already changed the night forever. And whatever came next, they would face it not as secrets, but as themselves.